and drinks.
Well,
In
right.
1980, Texas was the
Yeah.
first state to declare
What a day.
Juneteenth a holiday.
We have a day
so
planned
join
for
in
you.
celebration.
Is there faculty
Happy
association in the
Juneteenth.
house? Sure
This is Jack
are,
Meyer with your
yes.
Suffolk
Oh, by
Radio
the way,
Gaming
this is like the
News.
start of a bad date.
So
where
far
I'm-
this
I-
year,
I
there have
start
been many
talking and I
job
don't
cuts in the
introduce
gaming
myself.
industry.
I'm Dante
In
Morelli,
addition
the
to smaller
president of
game
the Faculty Association.
studios,
Good to see
many
friends
large
here.
companies
Thank
are laying
you.
off employees at an
Proud to
alarming
serve
rate.
with the best team in
These
the
big
business.
companies
Courtney
include
Brewer,
Unity
Kevin
Software,
McCord, Peter
who
DeGregorio,
laid off around
Kim
1,800
Eaton
employees this
and
year.
Cynthia Eaton, eyes
Microsoft's
on our
gaming department,
officers. Thank
who
you
laid
so
off
much.
around 1,900 employees.
Do we have Guild of Administrative Officers in the house? Yes, we do. Thank you to the Guild for being here and supporting us. AME, I know we have in the house. We have AME in the house. Thank you, Josephine Malakowski, who heads up the white collar, for supporting us and being here today. Thank you. We also have labor in the house. We have Imran Ansari from the Long Island Federation of Labor. Where's Imran? I saw him earlier this morning. Thank you for being here. One of the largest labor councils in the country, which is here on Long Island. Okay, do we have William Floyd in the house? Yeah, William Floyd, thank you for being here. Charles Cabrera, thank you. This is the third or fourth time you've been here with your students as a take a look at teaching local. We'll talk more about that at lunch. I also want to thank Paul Helbig, Elizabeth Costa Saliani, Ashley Siebert, and of course, the president of the William Floyd United Teachers, Michael Delveni, for the great collaboration and work together. I also want to thank Faculty Association member and professor of radio and television, Carl Coulange, for he and his students putting on a live stream of this today. So doing great work. And doing that excellent work along with Larry Hertzman. So happy that we're here to help. They're here to help us today. The theater department, thank you to the chair, Charlie Witterich, and of course, Jason Kenkel for running logistics and lights and microphones and a lot of things I don't know about, but you make it work, and we're so happy. Thank you. We are here today, which actually sounds like the beginning of a marriage ceremony, right? But it's not really what this is about. But what brings us here are values. Today's a discussion about value and what it is that we do value. And it's the value of equity. The Faculty Association believes in equity, and we have demonstrated that by creating the Jedi Institute. Please do not confuse it with the Star Wars stuff. Full disclosure, I've never seen any of the Star Wars. I know. I will leave now. But I know about this Jedi Institute, which stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Values that we believe in as a union, and we are so proud to do this work collaboratively with the college administration. Thank you, Christina Vargas. Thank you, Dr. Patty Munch, for being co-collaborators with us, and Cynthia Eaton as well. Those are really the three masterminds behind the Jedi Institute. And the Jedi Institute asks us to do a few things. It asks us to think about the labor that we perform as educators and professionals. How is it that we can make our work more Jedi, more just, more equitable, more inclusive? And we ask that question, and we point to our student population here at Suffolk County Community College. I've been here for 18 years. Many of you have also been here for multiple decades. We have seen our student body change. The student body has changed not just simply racially and ethnically, but there are 60% of the students here at Suffolk County Community College identify as women. We're a Hispanic serving institution. There's great need and diversity among learning needs and basic needs as well. And the goal of the Jedi Institute is to look at that, whether we are a professor, a counselor, a librarian, or we're working with students in technology. All of that matters because our student population is a diverse one. And I teach communication studies. The number one rule in all of communication is to know your audience. And I think in the last 3 years of the great success of the Jedi Institute, that we've been able to tap into that. And I really want to thank again Cynthia, Chris Vargas, and of course Patty Munch for their leadership, and all of those people who have done a tremendous work on the Jedi Planning Group. The Jedi Institute doesn't happen, though, without the help of AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, and the help of Randy Weingarten. Back in 2021, there was money that was available by our national union, back to school grants, they were called. And I went to Cynthia, I said, Cynthia, can we do anything here? And I have this thing about being a union president. When your state or national union puts money on the table, you go after it, right? And you do something amazing with it. You do something really important and good with it as well. So Cynthia then teamed up with members of the administration, and we developed this wonderful, amazing Jedi Institute. And you will hear more about the work that the members of the Jedi Institute have been doing later on in the program this morning. The value of equity, we share that value, obviously, with our national union, the American Federation of Teachers. We share it with our state union, New York State United Teachers. We share it with our Labor Council. We share it with SUNY, and we certainly share it with the college. We are a wonderful, I think, example of what can happen in higher ed when you bring people together. We're better together because we work and collaborate together. And I really am happy that we have such a diverse, great audience today to celebrate all of this and to have these conversations. So I will now like to bring up to the microphone our president now of 3 years. Hard to believe it's been 3 years, right? Dr. Edward Bonahue is a Long Island native. He was in Florida for a while. We will not hold that against him. And he is back. And he is someone who believes in equity and what that means for our students and our community and our institution. It's my honor to introduce to you Dr. Edward Bonahue, the president of Suffolk County Community College.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to today's forum, Equity in Education, Shifting the Narrative. Our program today will include both thought-provoking presentations as well as conversation with Randy Weingarten and others. Randy, as you know, is president of the American Federation of Teachers. We also have with us today Mr. Ricardo Nazario y Colon, SUNY Chief Diversity Officer. Ricardo, thank you for being here. Also, Melinda Person, the president of the New York State United Teachers. In part, as Dante said, we're coming together this morning to celebrate the success of our Jedi Professional Development Program, which has been a collaboration between the Faculty Association and the college administration from the start. The success of that program, now in its fourth year, its fourth cohort just started, shows us indeed, Dante, that we are better together. That is your line, but better together, absolutely, in pursuing the common goal of equity in access and equity in student success. I know we look forward to hearing more from our guests, especially including Randy. Randy, as president of the 1.7 million member American Federation of Teachers. This is the union that represents so many of our nation's teachers, as well as early childhood educators, paraprofessionals, school-related personnel, and other kinds of employees from many different sectors, many different walks of life. The topic of equity is part of a national conversation within the field of education, and it's a critical topic right now in community college education. Fully half of all the students in the SUNY system, fully half of all undergraduates in the SUNY system are enrolled in community colleges. And as one of its 4 pillars, the SUNY system says that we are dedicated to the proposition of social mobility and to empowering the next generation of students. And these students are enrolled at community colleges, and here at the community colleges, they are more likely to be diverse, they are more likely to be non-traditional or working, and they're more likely to be students of color. And Dante, as you mentioned, diversity of all types is on the rise. All of us are seeing an increase in the number of historically underrepresented groups in our classrooms. And so embracing our ability to understand the potential and intersecting impacts of ethnicity and religion, language, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, it's critical if we as professionals are to truly support students regardless of their background and to make every student successful. All of us who are educators in this room, we understand the importance of examining how the diverse classrooms that we serve are key to enhanced understanding by and among all of our students. Here at SUNY Suffolk, we are also seeking to evolve and strengthen operationally by implementing measures that focus on equity and success for all. At Suffolk, for example, this includes implementation of early alerts and modifying our model for scholarships and financial support to incorporate wraparound services and basic needs. And in this way, we design with intention a college experience that doesn't wait for students to ask for help, but that proactively ensures that the college is ready to assist all students who want to learn. We've just concluded the celebratory season of our academic year, including commencement and pinnings and inductions to our many honor societies. Many of those ceremonies featured a student or two willing to share their personal story about their Suffolk experience and how it was a moment of change for them. We heard story after story that served to underscore the power of education to transform students' lives. We were able to see students from all walks of life, from diverse communities who faced challenges most of us would shrink away from. We learned about students who come from backgrounds where life and safety are not assumed as birthrights. And fortunately, these stories ended with a common theme, that these students found at SUNY Suffolk a pathway to opportunity that brought them much closer to achieving their goals. Some of you know, many of you know in this room, if you're part of the SUNY Suffolk family, that Suffolk is by far the largest community college in the SUNY system, with over 22,000 traditional students enrolled in credit programs. We transfer many of our students to SUNY baccalaureate programs, including locally Stony Brook and Old Westbury and Farmingdale, and many other SUNY institutions upstate as well. Many of our students, including hundreds from our honors program, regularly transfer also to many of the most elite and selective universities in the country, and their success testifies to the quality of a Suffolk institution provided by all of the faculty, all of the staff, everybody in this auditorium who comes together every day to serve our students. But that's not all. Thousands of students come to Suffolk each year to learn English, to finish high school, for job training that leads to their first employment in the United States, to transfer from military service back to civilian life, to change careers. And for all these students, too, the commitment of our employees, our corporate partners, all the friends of the college means that we work together and that our students can and will find their way to achieving their goals. So, let's continue this dialogue today. It will help us advance toward meeting our core educational mission, supported by the values of diversity and inclusion. And many thanks to our guests for being with us. With your support, we will extend this conversation. We will extend this good work outward from Suffolk Community College, not only to our partners on Long Island, but to the state level through SUNY, and to the national level through the American Federation of Teachers. This is the commitment that inspires us all to give our best every day for our students. At Suffolk Community College, not only do we just offer classes, but also careers are being launched, lives are being transformed, and dreams are being realized every single day. And I look forward to working with all of you on continuing this work. Once again, welcome. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, Dr. Bonahue. Stay. Okay. Everyone loves a fighter, especially when the fighter is in your corner. Randy Weingarten's a fighter. And some people may say, why are you using the term fight or fighter? Because there are a lot of fights out there. A lot of fights. There are fights to ban books. There are fights to eliminate tenure. There are fights to gain more financial support from states for education. There are fights for workplace protections. And there's somebody who's leading that charge, and she's been doing it since 2008 with the AFT, and that's Randi Weingarten. She's the fighter in our corner. And she's doing it at the national level. Whether she's beating away unnecessary attacks when you're in front of Congress, or some of the other chaos that you've had to deal with, you handle it with grace and conviction, and then you turn around and fight, and I love it. She told this story back in February at the AFT Regional Leadership Gathering Conference in New York City. I hope I'm not talking out of school, but I'm going to tell the story anyway because the audience is curious to hear the story, and I told them there would be a story, so here's the story. Then Vice President Joe Biden was meeting with a group of people. Randi was in that group. And the vice president at the time was quite indifferent about a school closing. You remember this? Yes, this is a good one. And Randi stood up on her feet, walked over to the president and got into with the vice president and got into his face. And the security detail had to get into formation and said, "How dare you act indifferent or speak with such indifference about a school closing which will ultimately destroy this community in which it's in. Because the K-12 schools and the education that is offered is the foundational bedrock for how a community is run and how a community is built." And since then, he's quite changed his tone as a result of a number of conversations over the years. I'm proud that Randi, our national union president for the AFT, is doing this great work, that she's fighting. As president, she represents more than 1.7 million members across the country. It's not just teachers, it's educators at every level, including higher education. It's government workers at the local, state, and federal level, healthcare professionals, and so many more. I love seeing Randi when I'm turning on the television. She's out there constantly advocating for public education. She's doing it in the New York Times and in so many other places. I am so proud of her. She is Jedi. She believes in just, equitable education for young people and for our educators, and she's just working so incredibly hard. It's my honor to introduce to you AFT's president, Randi Weingarten.
So, I got myself a front page of the Washington Post because of that story. Not when it happened. When it happened, it was at an AFL-CIO meeting, and it was supposed to be off the record. But somebody told Frank Foer this story, and he wrote a book about Joe Biden that came out in, August or September. And they had the audacity to use that as see what political sway unions have, as opposed to what it really was, as Dante just said, which is how are you so indifferent to if there's one high school in Central Falls, Rhode Island? You can hear me, my anger still is intense about it. How do you say that that school that serves, like you do, a Hispanic serving community school, how do you say that school should close when the charter next door has worse scores? How do you do that? How do you do that? Because that's the public school, that's the public place. And I was really angry. But to his credit, what Joe Biden did as we were kind of walking to each other, and as the Secret Service didn't quite know whether he was walking to me or I was walking to him or what would then happen, he did whisper to me, "I didn't know these facts." And to his credit, he got the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service involved. And we not only saved jobs, but we saved that school. and that school is doing incredibly well right now. So I'm really glad to be here. I did say to Dante that I want to have a Saturday Night Live skit that he does of me at one point or another, because he's so amazing at that and so many other things. But I wanted to be here today for a couple of reasons, and Melinda Person, my kind of compatriot in this work on the state level, just wave, Melinda. We both, on the state and national level, understand the absolutely essential nature of community college in this tapestry of education opportunity in this state and in this country. And so part of why I wanted to be here was to honor you, honor your president, honor the work our members do, and honor the students who not only are recipients or receptors of that work, depending on the day, but also for whom we leave this really crazy country right now, and who will actually take this and make decisions. And I say this week because this week was just the week of D-Day, the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And what are we going to do as a country? Will we be in this race of fear and hope, this race of anger and aspiration, this race of chaos and community? In some ways, all of you actually are going to be answering that question a lot more than someone like me, who's kind of like on the back nine, to borrow a golf analogy, even though I never golf. But the reason I wanted to be here today, I do try to be in a lot of our school sites lifting up, and our other work sites lifting up the work our members do and the interaction on education and on opportunity. But I really wanted to be here because of JEDI, and because of what JEDI represents right now in Suffolk County, in New York State, and in the country. I thought your president and Dante did a remarkable job in talking about this intersection between opportunity, equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. And ultimately, you can think about this in lots of ways, and I would argue that we as a country, and we as a union, and we as communities that believe in this, have done a really bad job in talking about diversity and in talking about equity. Because what happens is the way in which it's been weaponized to be a division instead of understanding that diversity in this country is our strength. The diversity is a way that we bring people together and we lift all boats. And what happens, unfortunately, is that some people see, and you're in Suffolk County, I suspect you hear this a lot, that if I get something, that means someone else hasn't. I reject that. A country like ours has opportunity hugely. And what we need to do is create not just a different way of slicing a pie, but create more pies, create more opportunity. And that is what diversity does. But in order to do that, we need to create equity, justice, and inclusion. And that's what you do here. And you do it not just in words, but you do it in practice. And that's what more and more of us have to do around the country. not shy away, but engage. This is a country of immigrants. Some immigrants didn't want to come. Some immigrants came enslaved. And it's a country, particularly on Long Island, where there is land that was where we didn't do the right thing with the indigenous nations that owned this land. But for most of the people who came to the United States of America, we came from other places looking for an American dream. And so how do we pull up that ladder of opportunity for this generation after we so firmly planted it for others? And that's part of our fight. But I would actually argue the way in which we fight this out is exactly what you are doing at Suffolk, which is that it's not simply talking about these principles, but at the end of the day, and this is where I bring back this issue of education and opportunity. At the end of the day, what do we do in education? Whether it's pre-K, whether it's K, whether it's high school, whether it's middle school, whether it's community college, whether it's a four-year college, whether it's graduate school. We are part of an arc that essentially says, what can we do in the education space to help prepare young people, and sometimes not so young people, for opportunity, for life, for career, for college? And what do we do in a way that we equalize, or we make sure we level the playing field so that anyone in America could have that opportunity? That it doesn't matter whether you were born to wealth or not born to wealth, whether you were born to resources or not born to resources. And in some ways, that is the real hope and secret sauce of community colleges. And this one does it better than so many others. I love community colleges, but this one is really special. The theater program, all the other programs that you have. And what I've seen you do from afar, which is why I wanted to be here up close, is taking the programs and the opportunities, meshing it with great teaching to create that ladder of opportunity for our kids at a cost that is dealable and doable. That's what you do here. And that's what I wanted to take a mirror and basically say thank you for. More and more and more, what we're trying to do nationally is take that idea of what community colleges do, both the wraparound services that you talked about, but also the experiential learning, the tinkering, the hands-on work. And why not change high school? Let me be radical. Even middle school. Why not change it from the test that we have had since No Child Left Behind in 2000, and change it to actually de-emphasizing the tests and emphasizing teaching and learning, and that connection over critical thinking that happens when you do projects. And that has been part of what the AFT's Real Solutions campaign has been about since about last, I would say, March, in a very intentional way. But for those of us who are, high school teachers in the dinosaur era, which is what I am. I taught high school at Clara Barton High School in Brooklyn, New York in the 1990s. Career tech ed, teaching school, teaching AP Gov. So that will throw out any stereotypes that anybody has for my black and brown students who won competitions against places like Scarsdale, not that I'm competitive, and other places like that. But the point is, what happens if we created, just like now we're doing with AP and International Baccalaureate, why don't we do this with all the different kinds of certifications? Why don't we figure out ways that BOCES is really cool, that we end up having opportunities and agency for kids so that they make their own choices starting in high school on? They want to. And what we've seen is that even in the version of career tech ed we now have, 94% of kids who are in these courses or in these programs graduate on time, and 72% go to college. So why don't we do more of this? And why not give and think about this? There are going to be 4 million healthcare jobs in the next, 5 years or so. 4 million that you can get right from a certification. CNA, phlebotomy, all sorts of different kinds of things. Why don't we have that structure set up that in New York, for example, we have a K through 16 or a K through 18 program or system. We're not worried every single year, or we're not begging NYSUT every single year to do everything they can to get $1 or $2 more for a community college. That it's all part of a way of really giving kids opportunity and choices. And what you've done with the JEDI program, and frankly, what I'm also really honored about is that grant program that we started in 2021 just to get money out in the field that educators could use and collaborate with their administrators and with communities to actually change things, to actually create safe and welcoming environments, to actually put COVID in the back mirror, knowing full well we needed to seed things. That grant that Suffolk got has helped create this. That's the work of a union. The work of a union that believes in community, the work of a union that believes in each other. So at the end of the day, I see 4 E's, not just equity: education, economic opportunity, elections, I'm not being political today, don't worry, and equity. These are the ways, these are the leverage points that we create opportunity. Education, opportunity, a community college. I don't have to teach you what you know and do every single day. We have to provide resources and support. Elections, you heard what I just said and I heard you clap. How do we change, rewrite the rules so that that which you just clapped for, that you know instinctively, creates relationships, creates critical thinking, has a pathway to jobs? How do we do that more and more and more? How do we make the tinkering that our kids do, make it into that passion, into purpose, and into career opportunities with paid internships and real jobs that they could have as they are in community college, so they don't have to run around and take a course and try to do an internship and try to make money on the side? Why can't we align it and change the federal and state and local rules to do that so our kids have that opportunity. That's why elections matter, so you can rewrite the rules to make sure that our kids and working class folk have those opportunities. That's part of equity. That's part of making education opportunity real. And the last is, and Dante said this, sometimes you gotta have a big mouth and be willing to be smeared and be willing to be spit on and be willing to be, I was gonna say scandalized, but that's probably not the right word. You have to be willing to stand up. But frankly, we shouldn't be having to have to stand up as individuals. That's what a union movement is about, to try and create that economic dignity, to try and create a way that working folks have a piece of the economic pie, that people can't divide, that we can lift all boats, that working folks can actually have decent wages and benefits for the work they do, which is remarkable each and every day. So I end where I started, which is I'm really honored to be here. I'm honored that you take on the issues of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion full on. I think more of us have to make the case about diversity for all the reasons I just talked about. But at the end of the day, working people and families just want a better life. And equity, economic opportunity, standing up for ourselves, creating education opportunity, and rewriting the rules through elections. That's righteous work, and that's what we're trying to do. And today, as we're here, sitting here, the biggest organizing campaign in the public sector just ended. The biggest one in the last 40 years just ended. And the Fairfax educators just voted for a union by 90%. That's how long-term we do this right. Education opportunity, economic opportunity, equity, and using elections to rewrite the rules so we can make sure that we help each and every one of our students who then will take that which they know and that which they do and the values they have to make a more perfect union. Thank you.
I would like to correct the record. I did not say that Randi Weingarten had a big mouth. Right? That was, you didn't hear that come from my mouth. Okay, good. But she certainly is a fighter and an advocator for us and for public education. Thank you, Randi, for that. Along the same theme of those who fight for equity and those who raise excellent voices for equity, I'm so happy to introduce to you Dr. Ricardo Nazario y Colon. Proud to work at Suffolk County Community College, and as a SUNY institution, we have a focus on equity. And not only that, we have a leader at SUNY who does that advocacy work for us through his work and his title as Senior Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And also, he's the Chief Diversity Officer of SUNY. He was born in the South Bronx and raised in the highlands of Puerto Rico. He brings a unique and diverse perspective to his role, and with over 30 years of experience across various sectors in higher ed, business, the military, and state government, Dr. Nazario y Colon is an accomplished administrator. His scholarly work focuses on the retention of African American faculty and staff and the role of Black culture centers and the dynamics of multiracial identity development. He serves on a number of boards as well. The National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Ed is one of them, and he's been the past president of the Appalachian Studies Association and a participant in the Appalachian Regional Commission's Leadership Institute. He's also a key member of the University Press of Kentucky Appalachian Futures Black, Native, and Queer Voice Advisory Board. He walks the walk and performs the great work of equity and equality and diversity and inclusion. Dr. Nazario Colon is also a Marine and a former Division I cross-country athlete, a graduate of DeWitt Clinton High School, a life member of Phi Beta Gamma fraternity, and the co-founder of Afro-Latin Poets. And by the way, he's also a published poet. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy to introduce to you Dr. Ricardo Nazario y Colon. Welcome.
I always cringe when I hit 30 years. It hits me. I was not told, or maybe I didn't pay attention, that I was gonna follow Randy. So I don't know what I'm gonna do. I think I'm gonna change what I was gonna say. But I do wanna say that I'm extremely happy to be here. Thank you, Dante. Thank you, President Bonahue. Cristina Vargas, thank you so much for inviting me. I come from Unions. My mother is 83 years old. She lives in the South Bronx in the same apartment since 1979. She's an 1199 healthcare workers union retiree. And yeah. And I'm happy to be here speaking to individuals who are members of union from all different walks of life. In another lifetime, I taught middle school Spanish over on Chambers Street. So I was briefly a member of the AFT. But now I have a different role. The role that I have now as system is to help advocate and help guide us through this thing that we call diversity, equity, and inclusion, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. Whatever the acronym is, the outcome is what we're looking to do, right, to achieve. We want to really lean into what higher education has always been about. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see my posts, and I try to make my own point that this work has been around since the very first institution, since University of North Carolina or Harvard, whichever you deem to be the first institution. This work has been around. We just weren't using the language that we use today. It was a DEI decision when Harvard opened and decided to only educate wealthy young males. Now, I didn't say it was a good DEI decision, but it was a DEI decision nonetheless. When the first HBCUs was established to educate African Americans, that was a DEI decision. So think about it. When the first women were admitted to higher education, that was a DEI decision. And that was not last year, that was not in 2000, that was not in 1980s. We're going back to the foundations of higher education in the United States. The work has been part of our curriculum. It has been part of everything that we do. University comes from universe, comes from the widest thing that we can imagine. We want to be all-encompassing. We want to give access to everyone, right? That is part of DEI work. We are not doing anything radical when we do this work. We are just going back to the foundations of what we're supposed to be doing, providing an education for the next generation. Some might say to help support the Republic, some might say to help grow the Republic, but nonetheless, we're here to invest in the future of our communities. So that's not in my speech, but I'm going to try to go back to my speech. As Dante mentioned, I went to DeWitt Clinton High School. It was the last all-male high school, public all-male high school in New York City. Again, here we go, right? Been around since 1898. I was an athlete. I was pretty good. I'm like 13 all-time New York City, not to brag or anything, you know. In cross country, I think I still hold my high school record in cross country at 16-14. But I didn't know anything about college other than you could watch people play football on Saturdays, right? So everybody assumed that an athlete of my caliber was going to college, that I already was signed sometime in October to go to college. And it was around this time in June of 1984. I was at an awards banquet at Yankee Stadium at the clubhouse where they were giving all-star trophies to the best runners in the PSAL. And they announced where everybody was going to college. And all they had to say about me was that, oh, he's thinking of going to the Marines. Because no one had recruited me, and I didn't really engage with my high school counselors about going to college. So we didn't know how to pay for it or anything like that. So here we are, 2 weeks away from graduation. I don't know if they still graduate like in late June, but okay. So it was one of those things. It was hot, no air conditioning in my high school, just the big old windows open. And my friend, or an assistant coach, came in and said, oh, I got you a full scholarship to Maryland Eastern Shore. No idea where Maryland was. My coach said, well, let me see if I can get you something. So here I am like a week before graduation, and my coach comes back and says, Fordham University wants to give you a partial scholarship. Will you consider it? I was like, sure. And he was, it's a really good school. It's my alma mater. I went to Fordham. I was not prepared to be at Fordham. I'm the first one to tell you. I was not prepared. Professor Sweeney, God rest his soul, would take points off of us if we didn't dot our I's. You know, a Jesuit education is hard, challenging, but even for the short amount of time that I was there, I walked away with some life lessons. I went to community college, upstate, Hudson Valley Community College, and I found success. And I will tell you, to this day, I've earned my doctorate. To this day, those 2 years that I spent at the community college were the best years of my higher education career. I connected, yes. I connected with my faculty, I connected with the administrators, my coaches. The environment was just right. It moved at the right pace for me. I was invested, totally invested. I made the dean's list. I was happy about that. One day I woke up late for an exam and I took a cab from Albany to Troy, New York. It was like $35. But that's the kind of like mindset I got in. I was like, I'm going to be successful. And so I've always had this desire, not desire, I've always had this reverence for community college in terms of the role that it can play. My sister went to LaGuardia High School, LaGuardia Community College. My brother went to Bronx Community College. I wanted to go away to college, and I ended up in Kentucky and finally graduated with a bachelor's in Latin American Studies and Spanish literature and became a secondary ed teacher. Yay! All right. While in college, I really learned about myself and where I came from, being down south, you know, in the black and white binary that is the South or was the South back then. I had to fit in one of the two categories. You know, I was placed in the black category. I lived there very comfortably and learned about the politics, of the racial politics of the United States in a way that sometimes in New York City, growing up in communities that look just like you never really get to understand. You could live be born, live, and die in the Bronx and never really engage with anything outside of the Bronx. And I'm sure that's similar to other parts of New York City. For me, coming back after 23 years of being down south between Kentucky and North Carolina, one of my biggest adjustments is the speed that people are moving here to do nothing sometimes. You know, let's hurry up and get to that red light. Let's honk and hurry up and get to that red light. But the work that I'm doing to try to advocate for DEI work across the system, to try to right our ship. I come from a background where we don't like to mandate things to people. I like to tap into your humanity. I like to tell the people that don't believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but do believe in access, do believe that everybody should have an opportunity. I like to tell people that are not racist, and that you cannot be a bigot if you're really trying to be the best human being you can be, because those things don't align with one another, right? When we say, I am a good person, but I don't like Puerto Ricans, I am a good person, you know, I help my mother, but I don't like black people, you know, those things don't line up, right? So I want us to think about that, right? What kind of people are we at the core of who we are? And what are the things within us that sometimes are in conflict? And why are we okay with those things to be in conflict? Because oftentimes they're in conflicts because we don't want to address them. We don't want to deal with those things because they shake us. They shake all of the narratives that make us feel good about ourselves. They make us think twice, am I really a good person if I don't like these other things? Down south, I had to deal with good people, people that I trust, people that I would let interact with my children, who would say to me, I don't let my children visit their grandfather because their grandfather is racist. And I would weep for them because I could never imagine a space, or I could never imagine sacrificing that relationship. But these individuals wanted to start. They believed in a different kind of world, in a world where children would grow up without those biases, where they didn't have to worry about children using the N-word in public because they got it from someone in their family. And those were tough decisions that people had to make. And I supported them, and I would tell them in confidence that I could not do what they did. You know, and that's part of the work that I had to do within myself, right? We all have it inside of us, and we have to deal with that. So we're here to talk about equity and the importance of equities. I think it's critical when we are engaging in the work not to get focused on the word equity, but let's work on outcomes. What is it that we're trying to achieve, and what's the best path forward for all of our students? And understanding that the definition is more important than the word. That what individuals need to be successful is different for every different individual that comes through our door. We heard our president this morning talk about the different members of our community here in Suffolk County, how it's different than it used to be in years past, right? And how can we try to meet the needs of all those individuals? Education has evolved, it's changing. Sometimes those of us who come from last century have to think about how do we leave last century behind and think about the next century. So rather than focus on this is the only way to provide education, let's think about what education could look like in the next 20, 40, 50 years, long after I'm not around. The work that I do has nothing to do with me or my children. I have a 30-year-old who's a happy barista with a college degree, and I have a sophomore, a soon-to-be sophomore at UAlbany, who wants to follow in Dad's footsteps and be a creative writer, I think. He's majoring in English. We shall see. That's just the first major. It might be a few more after this. We know that happens, right? But let's think about the future. Let's think about down the road. You know, let's think about what can we help the next generation do. That's important. Let's leave the stage ready for them to take it and move it to wherever they want it to go. So the work that we're doing at SUNY in terms of equity out of my office and in collaboration with the other individuals at the system office is to try to support, and I see my job as a servant leader, so is to try to support the needs of the campuses, whether they are community colleges like us here, or whether they are comprehensive or the youth centers. What can we do to help you achieve the goals that you have? I work with Cristina Vargas. We meet twice a month via Zoom and a couple of times a year at gatherings to talk about the things that are important around diversity, equity, and inclusion and what they look like on each campus, because each campus is different. Each culture, each collective of individuals brings a different nuance and a different approach. You say JEDI, some people say EID, some people say, oh, it goes from diversity to inclusion to equity, but the acronym DIE is not a good acronym, so we're gonna flip it around and do all these other kinds of things. So it varies, right? But the one consistent thing across the system is that there are individuals in rooms just like this, sometimes a lot more, sometimes a lot less, who are committed and believe that this work is important. Not for the sake of it being important, but because they recognize that if we're gonna tap into the best of our humanity, we have to actually do something about it, period. We have to do something about it. And it is not a zero-sum game. It was just mentioned. You don't have to give up anything for someone else to have something. That is critical. The narratives across the country are these zero-narrative discussions that somehow someone is being cheated, that it is not fair, that it is not equal. We're not talking about equality. We're talking about equity. And we know that our society, as an experiment, as all societies are, have different situations why some people have it and why some people don't have it. Regardless of the reason why we are where we are today, what brought us to today, the reality is that some people have and some people don't. And if we want to live in a society that's not Darwinian in nature, that is not about survival of the fittest, that we just don't, that we're not casual with life, that we're not, well, you know, they couldn't hack it, that we shouldn't be okay with statements like that. We shouldn't be okay with the Darwinian model. That's last century, a couple of last centuries ago. So let's think about a new century where we are looking at the world, where we care, where we weep for those who can't do it, right? And I get those Instagram things that make me cry randomly, you know. Someone in a wheelchair and somebody pulls off and they come and they cross them across the street and I'm like, I want to do that. You know, though that's real. It taps into who we are, right? We have to care about one another. We have to say hello. Oh, going down south. I'm triggered. Going down south when I was like 19 years old, and people just saying hi to me, and I'm like, you know me? I don't know you. The whole New York thing coming out, right? You know, it's like, why are you speaking to me? Do you know? Or like people staring at you while you drive. It's like, we have to embrace a little bit of that, just a little bit, you know. Here we stare at each other because we want to make sure they're not going to mug us or something. But yeah, let's be kind. Let's be kind to one another. Let's talk about how are you today, you know. Let's share a little bit about who we are. I really would hate to be in a place where I spend most of my awake time and not know the people around me. I don't want to be a cul-de-sac neighbor that says hi and drives into the garage and never comes out. The only time you see them is when they mow the lawn, and that's it. I don't want to be that neighbor. I want to be the neighbor that says, hey, why don't you come over the house, right? But, you know, it's not clean or tidy, but, you know, come on over. We don't have porches no more like we used to, but, you know, let's just get some lawn chairs and sit on the front of the double-car garage and just have lemonade. Well, maybe not lemonade, you know. But let's think about our humanity. You know, I think that if we expect and want and nudge one another to be better human beings, that these issues that we argue over when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion will tend to work out better. You know, I'll leave legislation, I'll leave rules and regulations to those individuals that are better at it than me. But I really want us to think about who we are as individuals, who we are as professionals, who we are in this space, and how we can be kinder and better to one another. And in turn, our students will benefit. Our students will benefit from us, from the culture that we create in this space, right? We set the culture. Those of us who work here, we set the culture, not the students. The students are transient. They'll be here 1, 2, maybe 3 years. We determine whether we provide service with a smile. We determine whether we walk someone across campus and help them find to resolve their issue. We determine the kind of culture that we have on this campus. That's important. That's important. So the last thing I'll say, because I feel like I've been here a long, long time, is that when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, some of us immediately go to a place, depending on our background, depending on our life experience. Those words, to use the new language, trigger us and put us in a space. Whatever that space is, think about amplifying it, making it bigger, because diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just first generation, Pell eligible, veteran, women, gender nonconforming individual, religion, race, ethnicity. It's much more than that. Those are like the common ones. You know, we have a lot of issues with a couple of those, but for the most part, everybody's kind of cool with it, most of it. It's just kind of normalized and we don't think about it. What the moment is calling for us is to be more attentive to the work that we're supposed to be doing in higher ed, and that's helping the next generation be successful. And treat each other with kindness. Thank you very much.
What a terrific message. Before we begin the panel, kindness. Let's lead with that first. Let's lead with kindness. Thank you for that, Dr. Nazario y Colon. We are going to take a little commercial, just a quick commercial break to give some shout outs. People who have worked really, really hard to help put this day together. I'm going to ask some individuals to come on stage. They're not going to like it, but that's too bad because I have the microphone. We're going to have Kelly Corrado, Lorraine De Leon, Donna Krompinger, and Jody Moran. Come on down. We would be remiss if we didn't take this moment to recognize all of the effort these 4 wonderful AME and FA members have put into what came together today. We deeply appreciate their know-how, their smart solutions, patience with having, quote, too many chefs in the kitchen at times, right? Cynthia, that's right. Cynthia also indicated in conversations with each one of you, it's obvious that you were all deeply committed to this work of treating our students with fairness, equity, and most importantly, with kindness. Never think that your role at the college isn't just as important as anyone else's in advancing equity at Suffolk County Community College. DEI is everyone's work, and boy, they do it well. The college is a better place because of your hard work and your dedication to our students. Thank you. And because I still have the microphone, we're going to embarrass some more people. Like, why not? Thank you. We would love to have Christina Vargas. Please come up on stage. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Dr. Patty Munch, Vice President of Student Affairs. Please come up on stage. We don't have, Cynthia and I, we're well aware we don't have any authority to boss you around as being members of the President's Cabinet, right? But we insist that, that both of you come up here and be recognized for your great work. During an equity meeting, Equity Summit at the college, we simply cannot miss this opportunity to recognize the two of these individuals for what they have done to make this institution more just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive. The Jedi Institute is now in its 4th year. It truly is a collaborative effort. However, none of it would have happened without the content, knowledge, leadership skills, and impressive work ethic of Patty and Christina. Chris, we know how fortunate we are to have you as our Chief Diversity Officer here at Suffolk Community College. You have been nothing less than fair, objective, and honest with our members for the last 15 years, and we thank you. Patty, yes, absolutely, right? Patty, we've seen you come up through the ranks at the college. I remember when you were a faculty association member. Absolutely. And we are grateful to the work with you on the student affairs side of the college. We recognize and sincerely appreciate how hard you work for the success of all of our students at all 3 of our campuses. Please know that Cynthia and the Faculty Association is particularly grateful to have worked with you and learned from you over these past 4 years. Thank you both. And now we will bring up our Jedi panelists, so please come on up and start to assemble on stage. They will introduce themselves, but they are going to be sharing with you incredible work that they have been doing to make their work and their labor more Jedi with our student population. So we will have a little Q&A after each person presents, and we will get started. We're waiting for a few individuals. Here comes Lauren. Okay. We have Dr. Lauren LeBird, Jen Forney, Professor Tom Flesher, Professor Dana Prather-Davis, and Professor Cynthia Eaton. And I'm going to give you a microphone.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'll start. My name is Cynthia Eaton. I think most of you know me. I teach English on the Eastern Campus. And there are 2 things that I've done to help make our work here at the college more Jedi. The first is in collaboration with our College Associate Dean, Jennifer Brown, and our former colleague in sociology, Misty Curelli. We worked together to create what we call the Jedi Syllabi. And we've created versions of the college's syllabus template for all of the modalities, online, on campus, blended. And we did so with an eye toward making things more accessible and more student-friendly. So for example, rather than just listing our office hours, the Jedi Syllabi explains what office hours are for students who may or may not be familiar. We have a suggested grading policy that asks faculty to consider balancing a student's process and product. And there's another example that I had jotted down that there's suggested language for syllabus and lateness policy that rather than have I don't know, maybe some, I would say a little bit more threatening of consequences type language. It says on the Jedi syllabi, if something is causing you to be late in terms of regular participation and submission of coursework, let's talk so we can work out a solution. So again, the language, the overall tone is just more friendly and more welcoming. And more recently, this past year, but this spring, I released through our faculty newsletter a version of the Jedi syllabi that's in a Brightspace module. Part of my motivation in doing so was to make that module accessible to all faculty so that our members are in compliance with the new contractual provision to use Brightspace. That's part of it. A bigger part, and to me far more important, is to have that module available in the hopes of making the Jedi syllabi this more friendly, inviting, welcoming tone. It's the first thing students read and look at when they come into your class, to make that more broadly disseminated, hopefully, across the college. No faculty member is under any obligation to adopt the Jedi syllabi, but we hope that many do. So that's one thing. The second thing is, just very quickly, I'm an English professor, and in all of my literature classes, ever since I was in grad school at UMass Amherst, I've always taken a very sociological approach to literature. But as a result of the Jedi Institute, 2021 to 2022, I revised all of my essay assignments to make them even more explicitly what I call research connections essays. In every single essay, I ask my students to blend three things: experiential evidence, literary evidence, and researched evidence. And I've always done something sort of like that, but as a result of Jedi, I've made it much, much more explicit. So what this does for students is it asks them, invites them, actually requires them to bring their lived experience and center that in the essay, and then reach out and make connection to the literature, then reach out and make connection to the research on whatever topic they've chosen to write about. And so that move from a compositionist point of view, that move between the general and the particular is one hallmark of a good thinker and a good student, and it's a skill they'll need in all of their classes. But also, especially for students who might be first generation, who might be having imposter syndrome, who might be wondering if they even belong in college, the message that it sends to them is they do have something. They have experiences, their lived experiences are valuable, and they do have something to bring to the table. And then we'll connect it to the literary, then we'll connect it to the research. And it helps, I think, let students know that we value their voices and we do want to hear about their experiences, and lets them see how that fits into broader research and broader data and broader statistics that are out there in the world. Good. And now I pass it on to Dana. Thanks.
So I am a professor of communication, and because of that, of course, I have notes. That's the way that we talk when you're a public speaking professor, right? So as I was thinking about my Jedi work, I came up with three sort of themes. My themes are think it, try it, transform it. And I came up with this because, look, we are all, we know, a product of our upbringing. We are the people who we grew up with, we are the people who we trained with, and that's a part of my think it point, that we need to go beyond where we have come from and look for new opportunities and new ideas. Statistics show that our populations in college are becoming more and more diverse, and we need to meet folks where they are to be able to do this kind of work. And I won't reiterate our sort of groups of folks who we would include in DEISJ, because I think we've had a couple of people discuss it already, but to be able to see those needs that I may not see because of where I'm from, I want to learn more. So I'm going to do some research, I'm going to do some training, I'm going to find out what's going on out there in the world that I don't know, and a part of me doing that was being a part of the Jedi process, which I thoroughly enjoyed and really do highly encourage everyone to do it. Just because you've gone through the training doesn't mean that you're going to apply everything, and you're certainly not going to apply it all at once. My experience is quite incremental. I'm trying to get my toe in the water, but I'm not doing everything at one time. But that does lead me to my try it point. So in my try it point, there were a couple of things I was focused on. One was improving my own use of universal design for learning. So trying to make sure that I am making every effort to get my students to have an experience that is commensurate with where they have come from. And I've tried to do that through a couple of things, like co-creating rules for the class. So rather than me simply telling them, this is what's going to happen, it's my way or the highway, buddy, we talk about those things together. And we discuss things like, how do we do discussion? I teach communication classes. I teach cinema classes. There's a lot of talking we do, and frequently they are about issues that might be a little difficult. So how do we meet people in ways that they will feel validated, whether your opinion agrees with mine or not? Because sometimes I have been wrong. It's happened. And I want to make sure that I'm allowing opportunities for us to co-create assignments. While of course there are particular course learning objectives that I need to meet, that's just a part of our particular class, it's a highway, right? There's not just one way to get from point A to point B. So let's figure out how can we do things that will best hit our students, and perhaps even sometimes have opportunities to do multiple ways to do a particular assignment to meet those specific course learning outcomes. Another thing that I want to try and do is I want to try and make sure that I'm pulling in my students' experiences. Certainly from the research that I've done, the professional development that I've done, a lot of things that I've been seeing really tell us it's so important for us to ensure that a student's experience is a lived experience in class as well as when they're out in the world. And so making sure that my students are able to provide some of the content for our course, I think is really, really key. And I've been trying to look at how can I better allow my students to make use of the wonderful opportunities that we have on our campus. I love our You Belong Here logo. I think it's amazing. I try to really put it forward. It's on the back of my computer, it's on my door, I bring it up in class. I also am so proud that we are a military serving institution, that we are a top, thank you Christina Vargas, 2-year Hispanic serving institution. I am so thrilled that we have the Centers for Social Justice here. So there are so many great things that we have here that we can tap into and let our students see those resources that perhaps they might not know about. So after we have done those things in class, then I'm going to move to part 3, which is my Transform It part. And Transform It is, number 1, assessment. Oh dear Lord, assessment. So, like probably many of you, at the end of my class for many years, I've been doing an assessment, asked students to give me feedback. How did it go? What should we ditch? What should we continue? And I take it seriously. I tell all of my students, you get 100% for this assignment. I don't care if you say, Dana was the worst professor I ever had. I want to know your honest feeling about what we can do to improve, so give that to me, whatever it is. But I've been trying to do better than that. So rather than simply doing a summary assessment, I've been trying to do mini assessments as we go along. So after we finish a particular assignment or after we finish a particular module, stop, take a moment to look and reflect what's going on, because so many of my classes really are additive. By the end of the semester, you have to have those skills we learned in Module 1 or you will not succeed. And I want all of my students to succeed. And then after we've completed those assessments, I take the next step of actually making the changes. I'm not just blowing smoke up somebody's skirt. I really want to do something different in my class by noticing what my students have told me and reflecting that I got it wrong. I got it wrong and I'm gonna do it better next time. And then I restart the cycle and we start again from try it. And those are the things I've been doing.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Flasher. I teach economics here on the Ammerman campus. And I think that there are really 2 ways that I try to do a lot of my Jedi work. One is in response to, fortunately we haven't heard a lot about this today, but I think we all know somebody who hears about Jedi and says, oh, they're just out to get the white guys. And I'm not sure if this is clear or not, but I am the white guy. So one of the most important things I do is I like to serve the Jedi community by being a face, I can't be the face of the Jedi community. Look at all of the people on the stage right now. But being a face for the change that we need to make. To that extent, I like to try to tell people that the misconceptions that they have about justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion being about changing our standards are incorrect. And so to that end, what I do when I'm teaching economics, which has some fundamental skills that we need to make sure students have before they move on from to other courses, is I try to implement, I phrase it differently than Dana does, but I use a philosophy that came from Google originally called ship and iterate. Is anybody familiar with that? So shipping and iterating means you don't make all of your changes at once. That was one of the big things that I heard when we went through our second iteration of the Jedi Institute in summer 2022. I heard from a lot of people that, you know, I want to do this, but I don't know what I would do for a project. And I thought this through, and I thought my project was about finding the smallest effective changes that I can make, and then expanding on them year over year over year, very much like what Dana said. So when I'm thinking about economics, pardon me, I'm going to put my economist hat on for a moment here. I think about what we call the rule of rational choice, which is that a risk-neutral actor will take an action as long as its marginal benefit exceeds its marginal cost. And that's what's keeping a lot of our students from succeeding in classes. The costs to do the work to succeed can be too high. Think about our student population. They're out there working often multiple jobs. They're taking very heavy course loads. A couple of semesters ago, somebody signed off on 21 or 22-hour course loads for some of my students. And I don't want to say it's impossible to succeed. I will say it would have been impossible for me to succeed in that situation. But we have students who are working to graduate quickly, who are working to accumulate the credits that they need. And so they can't always, even if they do, as Cynthia mentioned, understand what office hours are for, they can't always make it to office hours. They can't always understand work that's presented in a traditional textbook format. So the first change that I made was everything except calling it flipping the classroom, because students don't think they like a flipped classroom. But they don't mind having example problems to work through that are put up on YouTube that they can watch before class and that they can go over and that are robustly put together so that you can highlight key errors that they'll see over. They love that, right? But they hate a flipped classroom. And to that extent, that allows me to build up a library of, first of all, what I anticipate are going to be the greatest hits, the questions that students are going to ask in that situation. But second of all, each semester when I find something new, when the students are like, okay, those videos that are up there, I get that, but here's a question you didn't answer. It takes me around half an hour to make a new video, right? And so the idea there is that you're allowing your students to identify for you what they need, and you're not putting the pressure on yourself to solve every problem all at once. The other thing that I've noticed with Jedi stuff is that the stuff that I expect to just sort of blend into the background is the stuff that I get asked about later on. Carl Coulange, who's running our video system right now, he made a series of Jedi Journey videos, and I was fortunate enough to be in one of them early on. And the thing I get asked most about is something I did that I just sort of stumbled on during the pandemic when we were using polls to check in on student attendance. I was thinking that worked really well. How can I bring that into the classroom? So during a lesson, I'll just ask students, how do we feel about that? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle. And that is the one thing that people have asked me about more than anything else in that video. It seemed very intuitive because it's a way for students to tell you how they're feeling without having to raise their hand ask what they think is a dumb question, which of course isn't, because if you have a question, somebody else probably does too. But those small changes, that's what I try to remember. Those small changes are the ones that make the biggest difference. All right, thank you.
So my name is Jen Forney. I am the College Director of Disability Services. So I come at the JEDI work a little bit differently. I'm not in the classroom, but yet we're in all the classrooms. So Student Affairs sort of has a different lens when we're looking at this work. And that's why, again, I love the You Belong Here idea, because I think that's something we try to take within Disability Services and, again, across Student Affairs to make sure that students are feeling that way. And how are we doing that? What different things can we do? And one of the big things I think in Disability Services we try to do is be partners to our colleagues, because we are not in the classroom. We are working with our students, we're reading the documentation, we're trying to determine accommodations, but I think of communications all the time. That's a constant issue that comes up. And what is equitable? What is reasonable in a communications class with public speaking? So we're working with our partners to find what the answers are for our students, and how can we make those type of courses, or any course, appropriate for a student with a different type of disability, or depending what's going on. I think about working with our friends in IT, how to make sure the software that's being provided in different classrooms are working for our students who might have difficulty with reading or who have a visual impairment. How do we make those things work and adhere to the same standards that are going on in the various classrooms that are out there? So I think our work really is working in collaboration with so many of our faculty members. But the other piece is even taking a look inward at ourselves. Just because we are Disability Services and we're providing accommodations doesn't mean we have every single answer within our own office. One of the things we have done for a few years now is we work really closely with our veteran population. Our veterans have some difficulty getting good documentation, or what we would consider good documentation. Often this population of students did not have an IEP or a 504 in high school, but yet they've served our country, they're working with the VA, and they have some type of paper that says they are 10% disabled, 90% disabled, but really no good information. And so we're not going to send those students back to the VA to say, okay, now you need to go get an evaluation that's going to do this, and you're going to have, they're not going to get it, and then they're going to disappear, and then they may struggle in those classes and not stay here, they'll lose benefits. It's a domino effect. So we work with those students and have conversations, and we engage in an interactive process with them to say, okay, this is what the paper says, but what does that mean to you? What does that mean in a classroom? How are you struggling? Is it about taking notes? Are you distracted? Do you need to be able to stand in the back of the classroom? Do you need to be able to go in the classroom first to make sure you feel safe in that classroom? I think of a student who had a service animal, that was something that they felt they needed to do. To be safe and be able to pay attention in class, they needed to go in first, clear the room, and then they could be in the classroom, and it was okay. So we worked out an option to do that. Was that a typical accommodation? No, but it was allowing that student to have the same education as his peers. So we get to be creative in that sense. And one of the other things I just want to highlight that is new and upcoming, I'm looking at my colleague in mental health, is, you'll hear more about this soon, but we are developing a CARES team with mental health and a number of colleagues across student affairs and academic affairs that will work with students when they're struggling, when there's a basic need issue, when there's a behavior issue, when there's a concern that comes up. And part of the work of developing this CARES team is looking at students in an equitable fashion. These students of concern, that we're looking at each and every one of them the same way. That it's not going to be, oh, well, this happened on this campus with this faculty member, so it was handled this way, and maybe another faculty member would have handled it another way. By having it through one trained team that actually uses a rubric, we will be able to say these students are being treated equitably. We're looking at them regardless of whether they're male or female, regardless of the color of their skin, their background, that they're being given the same opportunities, the same resources, and that hopefully we're supporting those students so that we can retain them, that they can graduate, and that they have successful outcomes. So we'll be talking more about that with our mental health colleagues, but it's just something that I think really speaks to that JEDI work of looking at the diversity and the inclusion of all of our students.
So, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Lauren LeBird. In my primary role, I'm the Chief Business Officer at the foundation that's charged with raising money for scholarships. But I'm also a member of the business faculty on the Grant and Ammerman campuses. This work kind of came to me particularly in the classroom, that I found myself having an experience with my students that made me think about my own experience in college. And so by that I mean, I started to get a couple of questions. I primarily taught either early in the morning, 8 a.m., or 6 to 9, or a weekend. And I'd get comments such as, oh, I thought I was taking a class with a French woman. Or I've never had a black professor before. And being born and raised in Queens, right? Similarly, right? Come on. So it was very different. My educational experience was very different when I got to higher education because I wasn't in only anything until I went to Syracuse. And so I started to open up to those conversations in the classroom of what it was like and what it is like, right? To be one of the few women of color in business, both in industry and what my experience was, as well as in higher education. And I found my students were so receptive to that, and they could relate to it. And it opened up a different level of conversation around how we navigate management, leadership, and supervision and organizational behavior beyond the textbook, right? So if you are leading a group of folks who may be older than you, from different demographics, what does that look like? And in many cases, my students would come and say, well, Professor L, well, what did you do? And I said, well, don't do what I did, because don't do what I did. But we're gonna formally have some conversations. And so I think for me, the Jedi work kind of evolved in, quite honestly and a little selfishly, making me comfortable with where I sit in this space, and then connecting that with where my students and how they may feel. So whether it has been going to school at night with a child as a single parent, I've had that experience, being at a private institution, being at a historically black institution. I've had all of those experiences, and I find incorporating those conversations into my teaching has really helped create that environment. It has shifted a little bit. I primarily teach asynchronously right now, so I do that via video. And one of the first responses I have for my introduction video for my courses, I always give one is just say, hi, here's how you find your textbook, here's some alternatives, let me know if you have challenges. A young woman sent me a message and said, I've never seen a black woman in business before. The only other person I know is my aunt who owns a small business. So I was like, thank you so much for that. And please feel free to share your experiences. And so I kind of echo the sentiment of my colleagues here in terms of looking at my syllabus, making sure that I emphasize personal as well as professional and academic experience. There is no experience that's not valuable and cannot contribute to the conversation that we're having in our classroom, both virtually and online. And then the other piece is the basic needs work. And so I co-chair with Lisa Hamilton the Basic Needs Task Force, and that came out of my research on food insecurity and community college students. And so when we're looking at that work, it really came from the foundation and seeing the applications that were coming from our students that identify barriers. We had students that could not finish class because they didn't have glasses and they couldn't pay for eyewear, textbooks, transportation, childcare, all the things that we know are obstacles to our students. So really now taking the work that the development team and bringing it back into the classroom and into the conversations with colleagues to say, well, hey, if I'm teaching a 6 to 9, let me allow my students, bring your food, let's take a break, let's navigate what this is gonna look like because we're here with one another for 3 hours. Are we walking, in groups to our parking lot so we can be safe, and just having multiple types of conversations, I think, to not segregate, or rather to incorporate the fact that humanity is in education. You can't have true teaching and learning exchange without acknowledging who is in the room, where they're coming from, and what they're bringing to the conversation, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable.
Thank you to our panelists, and we have some time for Q&A and or some comments, but before I do so, I just want to say that Professor Rachel Billings was supposed to be a panelist today. She really wanted to be here, but she unfortunately had a member of her family pass away, so she couldn't be here today with us. But Rachel is very much committed to this work, and we're so proud of what she's done. With that said, we would love to hear from you. Questions, comments. I'm going to be Phil Donahue, give this microphone back, pick up another microphone, and go through the audience. Who remembers Phil Donahue? Hey, all right, here we go. Any questions? Does somebody have a question? Yes, we do. Please. Yeah, good.
Hi there. Jen, I guess my question's for you. I was interested in what you were saying about like trying to help out with the veterans. So is it possible then that they can be granted accommodations through a process of, evaluation within your office, even if they don't have whatever else from somewhere else? I guess that's the question.
Sure. So our office doesn't evaluate students. We don't have the type of person or worker who would do the evaluations. We do have referral lists of local places like Stony Brook, Hofstra, who can do full evaluations for students. So if a student comes to us, any student, not just a veteran, who thinks they might have a disability, might have a learning disability, ADHD, we will refer them out. We'll give them the referral list, we'll help connect them. Unfortunately, there's a really long waiting list right now for most of these evaluations. Most are not covered by insurance and cost a pretty penny. So the veterans, in some sense, are a step ahead because at least they're connected to the VA, so we can get some type of documentation. So what we do with any student who would come in and if they don't have the documentation we look for, we try to work with them maybe on a temporary basis. So some of you faculty may have seen on the accommodation letter something that says that they are approved for these accommodations. On the bottom it says for fall 2024 only. Often that's because the student's in the process of registering with us. They have something, not enough documentation, we're looking for more, but we don't want them to fall apart or not have what they need that first semester that they're with us. So it really depends on the student and what they need. If it's that evaluation, we are referring them for the evaluation. We might be referring them to mental health and wellness services. We might be referring them to a medical doctor to get something. Luckily, though, to the veterans specifically, they usually have enough that we can work with them. It just might not be what we're typically looking for when we're thinking about that traditional high school student. Does that answer?
Can I jump in for a second? Hi, Julia Kiley from Mental Health Services. We are also working with SUNY Upstate. They're trying to create a program where we could potentially do those evaluations virtually. It's in the works. We don't know if they've gotten the funding or the approval yet, but we're on their list that we want to be one of the sites that can do it if they do in fact move ahead with that.
And if they do, it's going to be great because, again, like I said, the cost is a huge factor for these evaluations. So if we can do it for some of our students who may not have the means to get those private evaluations, it's really going to help level the playing field because we don't know, did their high school not have the means to get them evaluated? Are they adult learners who didn't get that, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? So I think it's going to be huge, and that's why when Julia and I were talking about it, and it was a possibility, I was like, yes, we will figure this out. We will figure out some way to do it. So we're on the list.
Hi, I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Christina Bosco, I teach history here on this campus. We cover modern, medieval, and ancient history. We cover all the topics that make people uncomfortable. We do pretty good in the classroom. I have a question for everybody, if you have any advice on the asynchronous. People will make comments in their asynchronous classes that I can't catch in time, and we lose momentum to say, hey, have you thought about this? Or I see where you're coming from, but that was missing key factual information, or that was not a good way to go about explaining that point of view. Like I said, the classroom is good. You're in the momentum, you're moving. I love wrong answers only when we start with students. How do I approach this? But do you have any thoughts on asynchronous where someone's putting in something that maybe way off base or inappropriate and it's midnight and I don't see it till 3 days later and students have come to me. Those are the situations where I have trouble with the you all belong and how do I make people feel comfortable because I'm not catching it in the moment when they post at 11:59 on Sunday. So any advice at all?
So one suggestion, and I see there's a hand up there, I give 2 forums in my asynchronous classes. So one is my formal discussion, and then I allow for a group chat. And we have rules and parameters for what is allowed in the group chat, as well as not everyone is required to participate, right? So grade is on discussion post, group chat allows for kind of more open conversation. It is, students are aware that it is monitored, and so even though I don't participate, I do monitor the chat, and so it's free exchange, but it's still, within those parameters. So I think to allow for that, and then my group chat, quite honestly, is kind of pinged on my phone constantly, right? So whereas discussion posts, you might give yourself, today I'm gonna grade that first part, because it is a more open forum, that comes to my phone, so I can see real time. And even if I have to temporarily hide a comment, I can do so and still address it. Don't want to take a student's voice away, but making sure it doesn't deter and create a whole different environment from what the intended discussion is supposed to be. So that's one way to approach it.
My only comment was that Brightspace admin, Christina Johnston here, I just wanted to say that Brightspace does have the ability to allow for what is called like moderation of the posts, where you can approve the post before it then gets seen by the rest of the student body, students in your class. So it does add a little extra step for you. Now you have to moderate and look at the post before everybody else does, but that ability is there. And just like it was mentioned, you can have the notifications. So maybe if you get a notice, okay, I'll just double check it quick and approve it or hide it.
I just wanted to say kind of the worst thing you can do is have your only appearance in the discussion boards be to show up and tune up this student who has made a bad post. So what you kind of have to do early on is, first of all, accept that we're going to get students who are going to be acting out, because we're going to get students who are going to be acting out, and start early on making those positive, I really like the way you're thinking posts, or sometimes in the announcements you can call out, Ben's post this week was really fantastic, and that way it's not like being sent to the principal's office when you do respond to a post. Unfortunately, that's more work for us, but that's kind of the job.
So I think you've all answered this already, and our colleague, the history teacher, questioned it too. I was really struck by your words about being the white, the white guy, the dude. But no doubt all of you have had not just young people, but colleagues who are skeptical. And you raised it a little bit. What advice do you have for people? Because you're all such, it's been an amazing panel to listen to, and we've both been taking a whole lot of notes. But so what advice do you have for people in terms of how to engage when somebody is skeptical or worse?
For me, I'll start because I happen to be holding a microphone right now. For me, this strikes very close to my heart because I had an office mate for a long time who I thought was an excellent teacher, but who was very skeptical about this. And I'm still not certain I've brought him around. But what I try to do is emphasize that, first of all, we're here at a community college for a reason. We're here at a community college because we want to work with a community college's population. And part of that is opening doors for students who may not have the capability to open them themselves. And fundamentally, JEDI is not about changing standards. It's about changing where we meet students. So I try to appeal to those colleagues' desire for students to learn. And there's not one of us who works at this college who says, I have a classroom full of students, I'm looking forward to failing several of them. Everybody here wants our students to all learn our field. Selfishly for me, it's because I think economics is interesting, right? Thank you. Thank you. I know that's usually a punchline to people, economics being interesting. But I try to encourage my faculty members, my colleagues, to think about JEDI work not as helping an individual student, but as Dana mentioned earlier, she referenced UDL, Universal Design for Learning, making the interesting parts of your discipline more accessible to other students.
I just want to say, as a union officer who's been doing this work for the last few years, in Melinda and Randy, you know this, and Randy, you mentioned Suffolk County, which is a good, I'm going to say, healthy mix of red and blue. Healthy skeptics and people who are already there and ready to do the work with us. In the union and the faculty association, Dante knows this, my fellow officers know this, we have gotten the blowback. Like, this is not what a union should do. The union should be the bread and butter. The union should not be doing this. Governance handles the academic stuff, thank you. The union doesn't need to involve themselves in this. We've heard it all. And so my response, because I've been so integrally involved, is two-part. First, as an English professor, I think it's definitional. So when people talk to me about what they think we mean by the word equity, I can ask them, how are you defining that? Because that matters greatly. And so what I usually get them to do, and this is not my idea, this comes from the Caring Campus Initiative, they don't talk so much about equity, or when they talk about equity, they use the term situational fairness. Because when you talk about situational fairness, even the healthiest of skeptics in our local, they're never gonna say, oh, I'm unfair to students. Of course I believe in being unfair to students. They're not gonna say that. Do you know what I mean? So if you really, and so partly is definitional and partly is I just ask a lot of questions. Why do you resist this? Why is this so upsetting to you? All we're talking about is trying to reach all the students and give them all a fair and equitable shot at moving ahead. And they'll say, I'm not racist, we don't need any of this. I treat all of my students the same. And my response has always been, or they'll say, I just put this in an article I wrote for our union newsletter, is that I think there's a belief that equity and opportunity, all of my students have the same shot at succeeding. I treat them all the same, they all have the same opportunity to succeed. If that were true, and if there weren't such thing as implicit bias, and if that were valid, we should not see the vast inequities and outcomes that we see. So people claim that, and they say that, and I believe they probably believe it in their hearts, but what we're talking about in the JEDI Institute is equity in outcomes, demonstrable, measurable outcomes. And so Kalia Green, who I think had to step out, has been working with the JEDI Institute to get faculty dashboards so we can look at them much more closely. Our colleague Rachel, who wasn't able to be here today, has talked about being a person of color herself. She teaches math, and the AFT wrote an article and included Rachel in it, which we're very grateful for. And for her to say, I'm looking at my student outcomes and I'm seeing some inequities, there are inequities. And so trying to shift that lens from equity of opportunity to equity of outcomes is a piece of it, and talking to people about how they're defining and how they're understanding the definitions of what it is that we're doing here.
One of the things that, and I forget who said it to me a long time ago when we were trying to work on disability and the acceptance and accessibility, the coalition of the willing. Let's get the people who are doing the work already on our side, gonna be a lot easier. And slowly make that circle bigger and bigger. And we still do that today. If I have a question in a certain subject or how to make a certain course, what may or may not work, there's certain faculty that I'll call first, even if it's not that class, and say, how would you do this? What can you tell me a little bit more? Because they're willing to have that conversation and engage in the interactive process with me. So then I can call the faculty member who might not be on board and have a different conversation and try to engage in it a little bit differently. So we're still doing doing the work, but I have a little bit more information, and so I've already gotten that coalition on my side to continue the work.
So, to be quite honest, I don't know, right? I have yet to have someone directly come to me and say, Lauren, I don't believe in DEI. And it could be for a number of reasons, right? However, I have had to advocate for students in and out of the classroom, and I've had some experiences that have been a little charged. My approach is always, we would never want to do anything that would make our students feel uncomfortable, correct, right? And we want to always make sure that they have as much access to the success as possible, right? And so I've heard comments which we've all heard about, you know, our students' attitudes about certain things or where they've come from, and I say, oh wow, that's not too far from Jamaica, Queens, right? Am I different from that student, right? So, and just to say that even though, to say I'm not the exception, and my colleagues of color or of different ability or women or whatever the thing is, we're not the exception, and if we're not the exception, then we absolutely need to approach this from a standpoint of academic excellence. And that's how I've been able to have those conversations.
Okay, so I wanted to wait to go last because now for something completely different. So here's my thing. If my colleague, whoever it is a little bit skittish about this, I want to recommend that they consider enlightened self-interest. So perhaps starting with what's going on in your class is not where you want to go. Perhaps where you want to go is looking at what's going on with the college or what's going on with the state of community colleges in the SUNY system. So perhaps where we want to start, if we're a little bit nervous about how to take this on, is advocating for more funding for community colleges. When you look at the percentage spent per student at community colleges versus four-year state-operated colleges, it's not equitable. So perhaps that's where we can start to work on this change, because any of our classes can be better when our college has more funds to work with to allow our students better opportunities.
Show her the money.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to jump in. My name is Carol Hernandez. I'm the Assistant Dean of the Center for Teaching and Learning here, and we work with faculty. And I just wanted to comment the history professor who talked about the asynchronous course. I just wanted to say that's also an opportunity to model for students how to have civil, respectful discussions, to anticipate that there might be differences of opinion. You know, how do we have a respectful exchange? How do we lift up everyone in the room, whether it's online or in person? So I just wanted to say that's an opportunity. And again, to just echo what Tom said, when you're teaching a distance course, you do want to be in there every day to kind of see what's happening. And another opportunity would be to have students moderate the discussion boards, and echo what Christina said. There are tools to, to limit what is being posted. And then the last thing I'll say is, call us, because we can have these discussions with you and talk about different options. So thank you.
Check. Okay. So I went to grad school for education, and I think it was like a foundations class. One of the exercises they had us do was about learning styles, and you had to take an inventory of the way that you learn. Before they said, well, now talk to the people next to you and see how different you are from all these other people. And so from designing a class or a lesson, you have to take into consideration other learning styles. Some of our students, just give them the book. You don't even have to be a good teacher. They're going to be fine, right? But then other students, they really thrive on group projects. Some students hate group projects. So all I'm saying is the same way that you have to create multiple ways for students to engage in the curriculum, that's how you get the naysayers. We're just trying to get everybody. That's it.
Good discussion, good conversation. We're at a point where we have a little bit of time before lunch, but we want to do a big family group photo with our guests who are here today, who've been so phenomenal. We didn't hear from Melinda yet, but you will hear from Melinda at lunch, and it's going to be in another location, the Babylon Student Center, but don't go there yet. So all Suffolk County Community College employees, we are inviting you all on stage as we transition over to the Student Center to come up on stage, and we will pose for a photo with Melinda, Randy, and Ricardo. Okay? Thank you for a great morning. Thank you.